Previously, the discussion focused on the episode of the Muslims in Abyssinia, concluding with the moment when the Prophet Muhammad informed them of Negus' passing at the very hour of his death. The Prophet then performed the Salat al-Janazah for Negus, marking the only instance in his life where he prayed the funeral prayer in absentia. This unique event has raised various jurisprudential questions. Should funeral prayers be conducted for a prominent individual elsewhere, or is it only for those who have not had prayers performed over them locally? The four schools of thought have divergent perspectives on this matter. Before transitioning from the topic of Abyssinia, it is essential to note that the Muslims remained there for approximately 10 or 11 more years after the Prophet's migration to Medina, continuing to stay even after significant battles like Badr, Uhud, and Khandaq. The Prophet's instruction for them to remain in Abyssinia is significant, given that he could have called them to Medina during a time when he needed more manpower. The reasoning behind this decision appears to reflect the Prophet's strategic foresight, keeping Abyssinia as a contingency plan in case Medina did not prove to be a secure base. This long-term planning emphasized the Prophet's reliance on both divine trust and practical preparation, ensuring that the mission of Islam could continue even in adverse circumstances. Only after the Battle of Khaybar, when the Prophet had successfully neutralized the threats surrounding Medina, did he instruct Ja'far ibn Abi Talib to return with the remaining Muslims from Abyssinia. At that point, the contingency plan was no longer necessary, and the Muslims could consolidate their presence in Medina. A remaining controversy concerns whether any Abyssinians embraced Islam through interaction with the Muslims during their stay. While there are no extensive reports, some indications suggest that a few Abyssinians may have converted. However, it is clear that Islam did not establish a stronghold in Abyssinia until later conquests brought the region under Islamic governance. One significant incident from this period involves Ubaydullah ibn Jahsh, a cousin of the Prophet, who passed away in Abyssinia, leaving behind his widow, Habiba bint Abi Sufyan. The Prophet sent a marriage proposal to her while she was still in Abyssinia, and Negus himself facilitated the marriage, even providing the dowry on the Prophet's behalf. Habiba was then escorted back to Medina, where she became one of the mothers of the believers Ummahat al-Mu'minin. Returning to the events in Mecca during this time, it is noteworthy that the Prophet never visited Abyssinia himself. However, the actions of the Muslims there, under his guidance, are integral to the broader narrative of Islamic history. After the second migration to Abyssinia, Mecca witnessed two significant conversions that profoundly impacted the safety and morale of the Muslim community. The first of these conversions was that of Hamza, the uncle of the Prophet. His story is particularly remarkable and stands out among the accounts of early Muslim converts. Hamza, renowned for his prowess as an archer and hunter, customarily returned from his expeditions and, in keeping with the traditions of Mecca, would perform tawaf around the Kaaba prior to returning home, thus signifying his deep veneration for the sacred site. On one such occasion, the Prophet Muhammad was in Mecca when he encountered Abu Jahl near the mountain of Safa. Abu Jahl, in a particularly foul mood, began hurling insults and curses at the Prophet, expressing unprecedented hostility. Despite the barrage of verbal abuse, the Prophet remained silent, enduring the insults until Abu Jahl eventually tired and left. The women of Banu Hashim were deeply offended by Abu Jahl's attack, not merely because of its religious implications but due to the affront it posed to their tribe's honor. They questioned how Abu Jahl, a member of Banu Makhzum, could dare to insult their ancestors and humiliate their kin, especially when no male from Banu Hashim was present to defend their honor. When Hamza, the Prophet's uncle, returned, the women reproached him, challenging his leadership and loyalty to the family. They insinuated that his failure to protect the family's honor was disgraceful. Learning of the incident, Hamza's fury intensified. He inquired whether others had witnessed the insult, stressing the public dimension of the affront. The women confirmed that all of Mecca had seen it. Fueled by rage and a sense of wounded pride, Hamza, still equipped with his bow and arrows, marched to the Kaaba where he found Abu Jahl. Without hesitation, he struck Abu Jahl across the face with his bow, causing a significant wound, and fiercely rebuked him for cursing his nephew. In the heat of the moment, Hamza impulsively declared his allegiance to his nephew's religion, saying, "I am also a follower of his faith." This declaration, unplanned and driven by anger, shocked both Hamza and those around him. His outburst was motivated by the fierce tribal loyalty typical of the pre-Islamic Arabs, rather than a genuine understanding or acceptance of Islam. Hamza was known for his physical strength and formidable presence, qualities that made his confrontation with Abu Jahl even more intimidating. Abu Jahl, who had been seated during the attack, restrained his supporters from retaliating, acknowledging that his own egregious behavior had provoked Hamza's wrath. Abu Jahl admitted that he had cursed the Prophet more harshly than ever before, and thus deserved the consequences. Later, Hamza returned home, troubled and confused by the implications of his hasty declaration. He realized that he had publicly committed to Islam without truly believing in it, placing himself in a precarious position. That night, he prayed to Allah, seeking guidance. He pleaded, "O Allah, if this matter is true, then guide my heart to it. But if it is false, then cause me to die immediately." Hamza recognized that he could not retract his words without immense shame, and thus sought divine intervention. After a restless night, Hamza approached the Prophet the following morning, explaining the events of the previous day and asking for advice. The Prophet, understanding Hamza's turmoil, patiently spoke to him, explaining the tenets of Islam and urging him to embrace the truth of La ilaha illallah, there is no God but Allah. Through this conversation, Hamza's heart was finally open to Islam, and he sincerely testified to the Prophet's truthfulness, resolving never to return to the idolatrous practices of his forefathers. Thus, Hamza's conversion, though initially sparked by tribal loyalty and anger, eventually became a genuine embrace of Islam. His story illustrates the complex interplay of social, familial, and spiritual factors in the early conversions to Islam. In a moment of unplanned resolve, Hamza found himself declaring allegiance to Islam, a decision that seemed spontaneous but irrevocable. Faced with the reality of his words, he turned to Allah in supplication, praying, "If this is indeed the truth, O Allah, then open my heart to Islam, otherwise, cause me to die." His plea was answered, not by death, but by a gradual conviction that Islam was indeed the truth. This realization marked the beginning of Hamza's persistent commitment to the faith. Hamza's conversion significantly bolstered the Prophet Muhammad's position, as it brought the support of a prominent elder from the Quraysh. Hamza, the son of Abdul Muttalib and brother of Abu Talib, was the most senior figure to embrace Islam at that time. His conversion was not only a personal victory for the Prophet but also a political one, forcing the Quraysh to temper their hostility towards the Muslims. Hamza's newfound faith brought a noticeable shift in the Quraysh's behavior, as they had to moderate their animosity towards the Prophet and his followers. Only a few days after Hamza's conversion, another significant event occurred, the conversion of Umar ibn al-Khattab. According to some reports, this pivotal moment took place 3 days after Hamza's conversion, around the 6th year of the Prophet's mission, approximately 4 or 5 years before the Hijrah. The rapid succession of these two conversions, particularly that of Umar, had a profound impact on the Muslim community. Umar's conversion, like Hamza's, played a crucial role in altering the dynamics of the Quraysh's opposition to Islam. The story of Umar's conversion is deeply intertwined with the migration of the early Muslims to Abyssinia. As they prepared to leave their homeland, Layla bint Abi Hafma encountered Umar. Irritated by the circumstances that forced her to flee, she bluntly told Umar that his persecution was driving them from their homes. Expecting a harsh response, she was surprised when Umar softened and expressed sympathy, asking, "Has it really come to this?" His unexpected compassion was a sign of the inner turmoil that would soon lead to his conversion. When Layla later recounted the incident to her husband, he was skeptical, believing that Umar was unlikely to embrace Islam. He even remarked that Umar's conversion seemed as improbable as donkeys accepting the faith. However, he was unaware that the Prophet had already made a specific prayer to Allah, asking for the guidance of either Umar or Abu Jahl, saying, "O Allah, bring glory to Islam with the one who is more beloved to you." It was Umar whom Allah chose, spotlight the divine nature of guidance and the unpredictability of human hearts. The conversions of Hamza and Umar were pivotal, not only for their personal significance but also for their broader implications. These two men, who were once among Islam's fiercest opponents, became its staunchest defenders, demonstrating that no one is beyond the reach of divine guidance. Their influence within the Quraysh and their subsequent impact on the Muslim community illustrate the importance of focusing on influential individuals when spreading a message, as their conversion can lead to broader societal acceptance and change. In the larger context of Islamic history, the conversions of Hamza and Umar represent the turning of the tide for the early Muslim community. Their acceptance of Islam brought not only physical protection and political clout but also a renewed sense of hope and resilience. This period marked a significant shift in the struggle between the Muslims and the Quraysh, paving the way for the eventual triumph of Islam. In contemporary American history, few figures have done as much to enhance the positive image of Islam as Muhammad Ali, the legendary boxer. Over the past 4 decades, his influence has been unparalleled, transcending the contributions of scholars and intellectuals. Ali, beloved by many, publicly embraced Islam, demonstrating its principles to a broad audience. His conversion exemplified how a single influential individual can effect greater change than countless others. It is a testament to the wisdom of engaging with prominent figures who have the potential to impact entire communities profoundly. The guidance of Umar ibn al-Khattab to Islam was indeed a turning point, a momentous shift that altered the course of Islamic history. His conversion marked a clear demarcation between the past and the future, described by Abdullah ibn Mas'ud as a day and night transformation. Ibn Mas'ud, reflecting on this event during Umar's final moments, remarked that from the time of Umar's conversion until his death, Islam's strength and influence had only grown. Umar's leadership, especially during his caliphate, was marked by unparalleled political and military achievements, including the decisive battles of Yarmouk and Qadisiyah, and the expansion of the Islamic Empire into Egypt, Azerbaijan, Armenia, Damascus, and Jerusalem. His era was undoubtedly the pinnacle of Muslim power and unity. The significance of Umar's conversion is further underscored by his role in securing the Muslims' right to openly practice their faith. Ibn Mas'ud noted that the Muslims had not dared to pray publicly at the Kaaba until Umar embraced Islam. It was on the day of his conversion that they first gathered for communal prayer at the sacred site, a bold act of defiance against their persecutors. Umar's newfound courage earned him the title, al-Faruq, meaning, the one who distinguishes truth from falsehood, a name bestowed upon him by the Prophet Muhammad himself. Umar later recounted that it was during this public march to the Kaaba, with Hamza in the second row, that the Prophet conferred upon him this honor, recognizing his pivotal role in bringing the truth of Islam into the public sphere. The story of Umar's conversion is recounted in multiple narrations, each highlighting different aspects of his journey to faith. It is likely that his eventual acceptance of Islam was the result of several cumulative experiences. One such story describes a night when Umar, like many of his peers, sought solace in drinking. At the time, he was a young man of about 25, and he frequented places where others gathered to drink. On this particular night, however, he found none of his usual companions, nor was the wine seller present. Frustrated by his unfulfilled craving, Umar decided to visit the Kaaba, perhaps seeking distraction or solace. It was during this nighttime visit to the Kaaba that Umar encountered the Prophet Muhammad, who was alone, praying and reciting the Quran in the darkness. The Prophet's fearless devotion struck Umar, who initially approached with the intent of harming him. However, as he drew closer, the power of the Quranic recitation compelled him to stop and listen. Umar had never before paused to truly hear the words of the Quran, having been consumed by animosity. But in that moment, the beauty and truth of the recitation captivated him, planting the seeds of faith in his heart. This experience illustrates a broader truth about human nature. Often, those who oppose something do so without fully understanding it. Umar's initial hatred of Islam was rooted in ignorance, but once he allowed himself to listen and reflect, his perspective began to change. This pivotal moment set Umar on a path that would not only transform his own life but also the future of the Muslim community. His eventual conversion serves as a reminder of the power of the Quran and the importance of remaining open to guidance, even in the most unlikely circumstances. No one was aware of Umar's presence. Even the Prophet Muhammad himself was entirely absorbed in his recitation, oblivious to the lurking figure behind him. Umar narrates this encounter in his own words, captured in various historical accounts. He recalls standing silently behind the Prophet as he began reciting Surah Taha, astonished by the rhythmic flow and eloquence of the verses. Umar remarked, "I was utterly captivated by the cadence and structure of the surah." The power and precision of the Meccan surahs, with their short, impactful verses, particularly struck Umar. As the Prophet recited, Umar's thoughts began to wander. He considered whether these words could be the utterance of a poet, echoing the claims of the Quraysh. But the very next verse of Surah Taha refuted this notion. "It is not the word of a poet, little do you believe." Umar then speculated that perhaps the Prophet was a soothsayer, only to be met with another rebuttal in the subsequent verse, "Nor is it the word of a soothsayer, little do you remember." The verses continued to respond to Umar's doubts, as if engaging in a dialogue with his innermost thoughts, until the surah concluded. Umar later reflected that this was the moment when Islam first began to soften his heart. Though he did not immediately accept the faith, he became more sympathetic towards it. He left the Prophet unharmed that night, retreating to his home to contemplate what he had heard. This marked the beginning of a gradual transformation within him. The well-known story continues with Umar overhearing Abu Jahl, a staunch opponent of the Prophet, inciting the Quraysh to rid themselves of Muhammad. Abu Jahl, enraged by the Prophet's message, claimed that Muhammad had insulted their ancestors and desecrated their religion. He promised a reward of 100 of the finest camels, red and black, as well as 100 bags of silver to anyone who would kill the Prophet. The allure of wealth and status tempted Umar, and he resolved to take up the challenge. Armed with an unsheathed sword, Umar set out with the intent to murder the Prophet. Along the way, several inexplicable occurrences, including hearing poetic verses urging him to reconsider, briefly gave him pause. Nevertheless, he pressed on, driven by anger and a sense of duty to protect the honor of his forefathers. As Umar marched through the streets of Mecca, he was intercepted by Nu'aym ibn Abdullah, a coincidental encounter that would further delay his plans. Nu'aym, who had secretly converted to Islam, recognized the murderous intent in Umar's eyes and inquired about his destination. Umar declared that he was on his way to kill Muhammad, believing it was the only course left to protect their ancestral traditions. Alarmed, Nu'aym sought to dissuade Umar, reminding him that the tribe of Banu Hashim, to which the Prophet belonged, would never allow such an act to go unpunished. The tension of the moment highlighted the profound struggle within Umar, as he wrestled with his growing doubts and the pressure of upholding his community's values. After you kill one of their own, you will not live long yourself. If you truly wish to take action, perhaps you should first address the issues within your own family. What do you mean, fix my own family? Umar demanded. Nu'aym then revealed, are you unaware? Your sister and brother-in-law have embraced Islam. Why are you going after the Prophet? Tend to your own household first. Nu'aym was attempting to divert Umar's attention, hoping that he wouldn't harm his sister. He thought that by sending Umar to his family, he could buy some time and perhaps calm him down. After hearing this, Umar was further infuriated. The thought of his sister converting to Islam was a deep insult to his pride. Enraged, he stormed towards his sister's house. As he approached, he overheard the recitation of the Quran emanating from within. The Prophet Muhammad had ensured that every new convert was assigned a teacher, and on this occasion, Khabbab ibn al-Arid was teaching Umar's sister, Fatima bint al-Khattab, and her husband, Sayyid ibn Zayd. Khabbab, a slave who had suffered greatly for his faith, was reciting verses to them when Umar arrived. This Sayyid ibn Zayd was none other than the son of Zayd ibn Omar, a monotheist who had renounced idol worship years before the advent of Islam. Zayd ibn Omar was a solitary believer, unaffiliated with any community, and the Prophet once remarked that he had seen Zayd in paradise, standing alone. Sayyid had married Umar's sister, Fatima, and together they were learning about their new faith in secret. Even during times of intense persecution, the early Muslims placed immense importance on the education of their faith. Despite the risks, the Prophet organized a structured program to ensure that new converts were properly taught how to pray, fast, and recite the Quran. This commitment to education emphasized the significance of knowledge in Islam, even in the face of adversity. Contrasting this with modern times, particularly in the West, one may observe that new converts often receive little follow-up or community support, a situation starkly different from the organized efforts of the early Muslim community. As Umar approached the door, he began pounding on it furiously. Inside, Kebab was quickly hidden, and Fatima concealed the Quranic text, possibly written on a stone tablet or parchment, beneath her clothing. When Umar barged in, he immediately demanded to know what the sound was that he had heard. Fatima and Sayyid attempted to deny it, but Umar was not fooled. Enraged by their denial and by the news that they had converted, Umar moved to strike Sayyid. Fatima intervened to protect her husband, but the blow landed on her instead, causing her lip to split and blood to flow. At this moment, both Fatima and Sayyid, emboldened by their faith, declared openly, "Yes, we have accepted Islam, and we believe in the Prophet Muhammad. Do as you please." Seeing his sister's blood and hearing the conviction in her voice, Umar's rage began to subside. This was a pivotal moment. Umar, known for his stern and unyielding nature, had a soft side as well, and this inner tenderness was touched by the sight of his injured sister. Moved by what he had witnessed, Umar asked to see the text they had been reading. Perhaps recalling the snippets of Quran he had overheard before, he felt compelled to understand what had inspired such unwavering faith in his sister and brother-in-law. His sister became deeply concerned and hesitated, saying, "We cannot simply hand over the Quran, it must be treated with the utmost respect." Umar insisted, "I swear, I will do nothing but read the book." It is important to note that Umar was one of the few literate men of his time, possessing both the ability to read and write. His sister then reminded him, "You are a polytheist, a mushrik, and you are not permitted to touch the Quran unless you purify yourself first." This incident indicates the early Muslim community's awareness of the sacredness of the Quran, recognizing it as a divine text that required physical cleanliness, or wudu, before it could be handled. Umar, acknowledging this requirement, immediately went to perform ablution. After purifying himself, he returned and began to read the verses of Surah Taha. As he read, the truth of Islam penetrated his heart, and he realized the veracity of the message. With newfound conviction, he turned to Sayyid ibn Zayd and inquired, "Where is the Prophet now?" Recognizing the change in Umar's demeanor, Sayyid cautiously revealed, "He is in the house of al-Hikmah, a location that was kept in utmost secrecy to protect the nascent Muslim community." Armed with this knowledge, Umar proceeded towards the house of al-Hikmah, still clutching his sword. As soon as his arrival, he knocked forcefully on the door. One of the companions peered through a small opening and saw Umar standing outside, sword in hand. Alarmed, the companion hurried back inside and informed the Prophet Muhammad, "O Messenger of Allah, Umar is outside with his sword." At that moment, Hamza, who had recently embraced Islam, was present and responded with confidence, "Let him in. If Allah wills good for him, he will accept Islam. If not, his own sword will be used against him." The companions opened the door and escorted Umar inside, firmly holding his arms, as he was a formidable man. Once in the presence of the Prophet, Umar sat down, and the Prophet, without any sign of fear, grabbed Umar by the collar and pulled him closer, demanding, "O son of al-Khattab, what brings you here? What is your purpose?" The Prophet then warned him, "By Allah, if you continue on this path, Allah will destroy you with his punishment." Overcome by the sincerity of the moment, Umar declared, "O Messenger of Allah, I have come to accept Islam, to believe in Allah, and to testify to the truth." Hearing this, the Prophet Muhammad exclaimed, "Allahu Akbar," so loudly that everyone in the house of al-Hikmah knew that Umar had embraced Islam. This moment marked a significant turning point, as the Muslims, now emboldened by Umar's conversion, publicly marched to the Kaaba and prayed for the first time. The community, which numbered around 40, was led by Hamza and Omar, both of whom were fresh converts and commanded immense respect. Their presence deterred anyone from daring to harm the Muslims. Numerous accounts detail Umar's conversion, each emphasizing his resolve to personally inform Abu Jahl, one of the staunchest enemies of Islam. Umar marched directly to Abu Jahl's house, knocked on the door, and when Abu Jahl answered, Umar announced, "I have come to inform you that I now believe in Allah and His Messenger, and I have embraced the religion of Muhammad." In response, Abu Jahl slammed the door in his face, cursing him and the message he had brought. This act of bravery by Umar, confronting one of the most feared men in Mecca, exemplifies his courage. Following this, Umar sought out the most notorious gossip in Mecca, Jamil ibn Mamar, known for spreading news far and wide. Umar approached Jamil and revealed, "I have a secret for you. I have accepted Islam and now follow the religion of Muhammad." As expected, Jamil, eager to share the news, hastily grabbed a garment to cover himself and rushed into the streets of Mecca, shouting, "O people of Mecca, Umar ibn al-Khattab has become a Sabian." In those days, the term, Sabian, was used derogatorily to describe anyone who left their ancestral faith. However, Umar calmly corrected him, "No, I have not become a Sabian, I have accepted Islam." Umar declared, "I have embraced Islam," and it is reported that on that very day, several individuals publicly confronted him near the Kaaba, attempting to engage him in physical altercations. Among them was a notable figure, al-As ibn Wa'il, who eventually intervened, saying, "What is the matter with you all? Let this man be. If he has chosen a path different from yours, it is none of your concern." This reasoning, coming from a well-respected figure, provided Umar with some protection and allowed him to practice his new faith without further harassment. The blessings of Umar ibn al-Khattab are numerous and well documented. One of the most authentic accounts, recorded by Bukhari, relates that the Prophet Muhammad said, "Among those before you, there were individuals who were spoken to by the angels, though they were not prophets. If anyone from my ummah is like them, it is Umar." This testimony alone speaks volumes about Umar's extraordinary status within the early Muslim community. The impact of Umar's conversion was profound. Under his leadership, the Islamic State expanded significantly. While Abu Bakr, the first caliph, preserved the unity of the Arabian Peninsula, it was Umar who, through his strategic governance, saw Islam's domain multiply fourfold. The first 6 years of Uthman's caliphate, which followed Umar's, were essentially a continuation of Umar's successful policies. The conversion of Umar, along with that of Hamza, deeply unsettled the Quraysh. They now faced two daunting realities. The bulk of the Muslim community had fled to a foreign land, a move that was both humiliating and threatening as it placed the Muslims beyond their control, and two of Mecca's most influential men had embraced Islam, strengthening the Muslim cause significantly. In the 7th year of the prophetic mission, although the exact timeline is uncertain, the Quraysh tribes convened to discuss a desperate course of action, the assassination of Prophet Muhammad. Their determination to eliminate him grew, and they proposed an unprecedented plan. They would offer an open check of blood money to the Banu Hashim, with the promise that none of the Quraysh would carry out the killing. Instead, they would have another tribesman commit the deed, ensuring plausible deniability while satisfying their deadly intent. Once more, they approached Abu Talib, the Prophet's uncle and leader of Banu Hashim. They offered him the choice: hand over Muhammad in exchange for any amount of blood money, or face total isolation from the Quraysh. This threat was unparalleled in Arabian history, a complete severance of ties, including the denial of food, water, and marriage alliances with the Banu Hashim. In response, Abu Talib, filled with righteous indignation, refused their demands. He reportedly declared, "Do as you will, I will not surrender my nephew to you." Faced with this ultimatum, Abu Talib decided that if his clan could no longer trade or interact with the people of Mecca, they would leave the city and settle in the family-owned valleys known as the Sheeb of Abu Talib. These valleys, though barren and desolate, were part of the ancestral lands of Banu Hashim. Thus began the famous boycott, in which every member of Banu Hashim and Banu al-Muttalib, two closely related tribes descended from the Prophet's great-grandfather, voluntarily withdrew into these valleys. The boycott was an act of collective resistance against the oppressive measures of the Quraysh, marking one of the most challenging periods in early Islamic history. This marks the beginning of the infamous boycott against the Banu Hashim. To enforce it, the Quraysh convened and drafted a pact that would bind them all to its terms. The treaty stipulated that no one would engage in trade with the Banu Hashim, nor marry into or from their clan. This boycott was comprehensive, extending across economic, political, and social spheres, effectively isolating the Banu Hashim from the rest of Meccan society. The treaty was solemnized and placed inside the Kaaba, the holiest sanctuary in Mecca, symbolizing its inviolability. Tradition holds that Mansur ibn Ikrimah, who penned the treaty, later suffered a paralyzed hand, a divine retribution, as the Prophet Muhammad had invoked against him. The severe conditions of the boycott forced the Banu Hashim to leave Mecca, leading them to settle in a remote valley. Accounts vary on the duration of their exile. Some suggest it lasted 2 years, while others claim it extended to 3. Unfortunately, historical records from this period are sparse, largely due to the traumatic nature of the events and the limited number of survivors who could recount them. Many details were either lost or overlooked as those who endured the hardship sought to forget the suffering they endured. During their exile, the Banu Hashim and their allies survived on meager rations, often resorting to eating leaves and wild plants. It is narrated that their waste resembled that of goats due to the lack of proper sustenance. Every few weeks, someone sympathetic to their plight would secretly send provisions to the valley. The narrow entrance, only wide enough for a camel, was a lifeline for these secret deliveries. One of the most notable figures who aided the Banu Hashim was Mudam ibn Adi, a non-Muslim who showed extraordinary compassion toward the Prophet and his followers. The Prophet later praised him, declaring that had Mudam been alive during the Battle of Badr and asked for the release of the captives, he would have granted them to him without question or ransom. Mudam's acts of kindness included sending camels loaded with food and supplies into the valley, ensuring the sustenance of the besieged clan. Others, like Hakim ibn Hizam, nephew of Khadijah, also contributed to their survival by occasionally smuggling in food. Despite these efforts, the Banu Hashim's existence during this period was one of extreme hardship. Even under such dire circumstances, the Prophet Muhammad continued his mission. During the Hajj season, he would leave the valley to meet with visiting tribes, seeking to spread the message of Islam and gain new converts. The boycott persisted for 2 or 3 years until a series of events led to its dissolution. One pivotal moment was the Prophet's supplication, invoking a famine akin to the one faced by the people of Joseph. The resulting drought was so severe that the Meccans were reduced to eating carrion and chewing on animal hides. Realizing that this calamity was a direct consequence of the Prophet's supplication, they sought reconciliation and eventually lifted the boycott, bringing an end to one of the most trying episodes in early Islamic history. The second incident, among the several concurrent events, underscores a significant moment when some members of the Quraysh, whose hearts had softened, decided to take action against the oppressive pact. Chief among them was Hisham ibn Omar, whose lineage traced back to Abdul Muttalib through his mother, Attika bint Abdul Muttalib, making him a maternal cousin of the Prophet Muhammad. Feeling compelled to intervene, Hisham sought the counsel of his friend, Zuhair ibn Abi Umayyah, to devise a plan to end the boycott. They agreed that the first step was to gather those who shared their disapproval of the pact, recognizing that there is strength in numbers. Among those they approached were prominent figures like Mudam ibn Adi, who had previously shown sympathy towards the besieged Banu Hashim, along with other notable individuals such as Abu al-Bakhtari ibn Hisham. By rallying these allies, they sought to bolster their position against the boycott. Zuhair then proposed a strategy to confront the Quraysh leaders directly during their next assembly at the Dar al-Nadwa, the tribal council. The following day, as the assembly convened, each participant took their usual place, unaware of the plan set in motion. Zuhair, strategically chosen for his more distant genealogical ties to the Banu Hashim, rose to address the assembly. His position allowed him to speak with less suspicion of personal bias. Zuhair boldly questioned the morality of the boycott, condemning it as a cruel and unjust act against their own kin. His words provoked the ire of Abu Jahl, who immediately challenged him, insisting that the entire tribe had consented to the treaty. At this juncture, Hisham ibn Omar stood up, denying that he had ever agreed to such a pact. His denial was soon echoed by Mudam ibn Adi, and then by others who had been strategically positioned throughout the assembly. One by one, they repudiated the treaty, leaving Abu Jahl increasingly isolated as the support for the boycott visibly crumbled. Realizing that a coordinated challenge had been orchestrated, Abu Jahl accused them of conspiring to undermine the pact. Although his accusation was accurate, the momentum had already shifted, with public sentiment now favoring the dissolution of the boycott. The decisive moment came when the Prophet Muhammad informed his uncle, Abu Talib, that Allah had revealed to him that the treaty had been destroyed by termites, leaving only the words, Bismika al-Hikmah, in your name, O Allah, intact. The Kaaba, where the treaty was kept, was securely locked, and no one had access to the document. The plausibility of such destruction seemed improbable, yet the Prophet's confidence in this divine revelation convinced Abu Talib to take a bold stand. Abu Talib declared that his nephew, the Prophet Muhammad, had informed him that the treaty had been entirely consumed by termites, leaving only the phrase, Bismika al-Hikmah, in your name, O Allah, intact. Abu Talib staked his entire trust on the Prophet's word, challenging the Quraysh to verify the claim. He proposed that if the Prophet's statement proved true, they would abandon the boycott and return to Mecca. If not, he would willingly surrender the Prophet to them. The Quraysh, confident that the outcome would be in their favor, agreed to the challenge. Unveiling the treaty, it was indeed found to be destroyed, with only the sacred phrase remaining. The Quraysh, astonished and angered, dismissed it as mere sorcery. However, the commitment to the Prophet's claim was upheld, leading to the cessation of the boycott and the return of the Banu Hashim to Mecca. During this period, an extraordinary event unfolded. Abu Talib composed what is considered the most eloquent poem in the Arabic language, known as the Lamiyyaa. This poem, characterized by its use of the Arabic letter, lam, at the end of each line, spans approximately 100 lines and is lauded as a pinnacle of pre-Islamic poetry. Its profound content addresses the Quraysh's maltreatment and critiques their failure to protect their kin, contrasting sharply with the more traditional themes of love and romance found in earlier poetry. Despite its profound beauty and complexity, the Lamiyya is challenging to fully appreciate, even for those fluent in Arabic. Abu Talib's poetic contribution during this period remains a testament to the rich cultural heritage of the time. In summary, the Prophet and his companions returned to Mecca after approximately 2 to 3 years, around the 10th year of his mission, when he was about 49 years old. However, this return marked the beginning of a period of profound trials, including the deaths of Abu Talib and Khadija, and the challenging incident at Ta'if. These events were precursors to the migration to Medina, a crucial chapter in Islamic history. Further discussion on these trials will follow.